On November 26, 1863, President Lincoln asked the nation to observe a day of Thanksgiving. The idea was to try and heal a country torn apart by war. But on one remote estate in Maryland, the day would be remembered for something else entirely. So let's get right into this incredible and pretty shocking piece of history. I mean, that right there just sends a shiver down your spine, doesn't it? It perfectly sets the scene for what was about to unfold. A day that was supposed to be about gratitude was about to become a meticulously planned massacre, carried out by the very people serving the meal. So picture this, the Miller Estate. It's a huge, isolated tobacco farm in Maryland. And while the rest of the country is deep in the Civil War, there's a different kind of war that's been raging on this land for decades. A brutal, hidden war between the enslavers and the enslaved. But here's the thing. The people behind this plot weren't soldiers. They were the two most trusted servants in the house, Clemens, the butler, and Haley, the cook. And their weapon wasn't a rifle or a blade. It was something far more intimate. Rat poison, secretly collected and carefully measured out for the evening's drinks. Now, to really get why this happened, you have to look beyond the perfect, polished image of the Miller estate. Because what outsiders saw as this model Southern farm was, for the 47 enslaved people living there, a private kingdom of absolute torture. You can see the two realities right here on this slide. On the surface, you have this beautiful picture of wealth and success, but the hidden truth? It was a place like the Correction Barn, a windowless building where the owner, Anthony Miller, would personally whip people, with chains literally hanging from the ceiling. This number, 2, represents something unbelievably cruel. It's the number of fingers that Haley, the cook, lost when she was only 14 years old. Her crime? She stole a piece of bread for her sick brother. As punishment, Anthony Miller used a heated chisel to amputate 2 of her fingers in front of everyone. It was a scar she had to look at every single day. And Anthony's wife, Rose, was just as monstrous. She used her Bible as a weapon, inventing this sick ritual she called purification of the black soul. She'd force young enslaved girls down into the basement to kneel on dried corn for hours on end, starving them, leaving them in the freezing cold, all under the guise of religious teaching. And make no mistake, this so-called purification was a death sentence. 3 young girls died because of Rose Miller's rituals. One from a nasty infection, another from starvation, and a third froze to death, all alone in that dark basement. So, what about Clemens, the butler? Well, for years, he had managed to survive by making himself invisible, by just enduring the horror. But a string of personal tragedies was about to push him over the edge. I mean, just look at this timeline of what was taken from him. First, his 2 little boys are sold off to cover a gambling debt. Then, just months before the massacre, he learns Miller is planning to sell his teenage daughter, Hope. But the final straw, the thing that broke him, happened just 1 month before Thanksgiving. His pregnant wife, Sally, was whipped so badly that she and their unborn child died. And this quote right here is the key to understanding what happened next. After his wife's death, something inside Clemens just snapped. But it wasn't a hot-headed rage. The source material describes it as a cold, clear, calculated decision. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about liberation. You have to understand, this was not some spur-of-the-moment act of violence. No, Clemens and Haley put together an incredibly detailed plan. They used their knowledge of the house, of the family's routines, and they turned it all into a weapon. I mean, just look at the level of planning here. Clemens gets his hands on the arsenic. Haley actually tests it on a rat to know exactly how long it would take to work. They poison 22 bottles of alcohol in the cellar, and on top of all that, they organize a mass escape for 38 other people and work out a secret signal. This was a full-blown covert operation, happening right under their oppressors' noses. So the stage is set. It's Thanksgiving night. 19 adult family members are sitting down for a huge feast. Dinner service starts, everything seems normal, but every passing second is a countdown to a horror that only 2 people in that room know is coming. But here's something really important to know. They drew a hard line in the sand. Despite everything that had been done to their own families, to their own children, they made sure that the 6 Miller children at that dinner would be safe. The cider and the milk for them were kept completely separate. The poison was only for the adults. And then, around 8 o'clock, it begins. One person complains about feeling sick, and then suddenly, it's everyone. All 19 adults become violently ill. It's absolute chaos. Amid the panic, Haley gets the other servants to gather the children and rush them upstairs, away from the horror. As Anthony Miller himself collapses, Clemens slips away to the basement and rings the alarm bell 3 times. That was the signal. The plan was horrifically effective. In total, 19 adults at that table were fatally poisoned. And, just as they had planned, the number of children who were harmed was exactly 0. But as the house was consumed by death and chaos, this is the number that mattered most to the people who planned it. 38 enslaved men, women, and children, including Clemens and Haley and their daughters, vanished into the dark of night to make a desperate run for freedom. So what happened after all this? Well, the aftermath is just as telling as the event itself. When the bodies were eventually found, there was of course a search, but it was disorganized, and the fugitives were already long gone. This table sums it all up pretty well. The Miller family was basically wiped out, and their grand estate just fell apart. Meanwhile, Clemens, Haley, and most of their group actually made it. They got to Canada and lived out the rest of their days as free people. And the official story? Well, with the Civil War raging, the local authorities didn't want the feds getting involved, so they just called it an accidental poisoning and buried the whole thing. Because there's no official account, the story split in 2. For Black communities, it became this powerful, whispered legend of resistance, the story of the butler who freed his people. But for the local white communities, it just turned into a ghost story about a haunted house, completely stripping away what actually happened. And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? In a system where the law itself is what's holding you captive, where there is no path to justice, what do you even call an act like this? Sure, it was a massacre, but it was also a prison break. It was an act of brutal revenge, but it was also a desperate flight to freedom. The story of what happened at Thanksgiving doesn't give us any easy answers, but it forces us to think about the impossible choices people have to make when the world denies their very humanity.